Hi guys, how you doing today? I'm here again with another video on your 100 days of code, and today let's talk a little bit about some of the things you'll be using as you go forward in your coding. I'm almost certain that the coding part is, starting to be an easy skill for you, but some of the things you might be having challenges with is what you probably not be taught in the code. And of course, there's a lot of videos on what I'll be talking to you about, but I thought felt well. It wouldn't ought to have just one more of such out there just for you. And we'll be talking today about source control management. Source control. What is source control management? Now, routinely every year I refresh my primary hard drive, the one I use for installing my apps and stuff. Of course, I have a lot of backup, so I don't lose anything when I do a PC refresh every year. It's just to keep my computer clean and nice and up and ready for the new year. And when I come back from the refresh operation, I sometimes will just resume my old code just as normally as I would. But I don't store this code on my hard drives. I store them somewhere. That is one of the purposes of source control management. I have a repository somewhere, actually a couple of them, because of the kind of projects I work on. I have them all sorted out almost everywhere. And I'll be talking to you about the tools I use and how I use source control. Now, this is how basically my understanding of how source control works. So I have my code here. So for example, I'm just starting a fresh project. Okay. I'm starting a new fresh project. Just a moment. Let me get that in view. Yeah, I'm starting a new project. So I create a folder for it. I create all my files, my git ignore and stuff. And what happens is I push it up to that source control system. For example, GitHub. And I start writing my code. I start pushing it. That one seems fairly easy. Yep. But let's say, for example, I make a mistake and say 005. And I want to revert to 004. I want to go to the last stable code system that I have running. If I was to do that normally on my system, I would have to do a lot of deleting, a lot of tracking what files are changed and trying to remember what actually happened. But what source control does is it gives me a history of my changes, and I can just, by doing some right clickings and some typings, I will go to the last stable release I have. Now, let me simulate this with something I currently have. So when I started this series, I have the 100 days of code that I pushed up to the repo up there, and I realized, hey, the way I name my files ain't that nice. I instead of doing day 1, day 2, day 3, I want to name it 0102 up until my current day. So what I need to do now, I'm simulating this on a new system. So what I need to do first is pull down the code from GitHub. Actually, I'm not signed in here, so maybe it will help me to actually do a little bit of signing here, but I'll leave that for a while. So what I need to do is clone this down by clicking the code area button. So I could do this if I have git CLI installed on my system. Click on this and then or do it with GitHub Desktop. Now, GitHub Desktop is a tool that lets you manage your source control files much more easily than using the CLI. For me, I find it useful because, well, I use GitHub a lot, and instead of me having to type code here and there, I could just do a few clicks and then I'm done. Now, to get the GitHub Desktop application, I'll need to go to this website. That is desktop.github.com. Now, there's a lot of desktop clients for Git source control management, but GitHub Desktop is one of my favorites. And mostly the IDEs or source code editing environment you also have all these tools by default. But I very much actually love just using the GitHub Desktop application because it's deeply integrated with GitHub. It talks with other source control systems up there, for example, Azure DevOps, GitLab and stuff. As long as it's a Git repo, it can work with it. So before I go ahead and install this, let me actually go to my system and create a folder where I'll be storing my source code, because that will come in handy in a while. Now, this is bad practice, but let's say I store my source code on my desktop. So I create a new folder and I call it code. Oh, another best way, let me actually cut it out of there and put it in my drive C. I think that will be a little bit better. So this is where my source codes will live. One thing I could do is right click it over here and pin it to quick access. Okay, so I can easily access it outside from anywhere in my Windows Explorer. Now, you can do this on Mac also. So there's a area where you can add pin your quick access files and all that, but I wouldn't be dealing with Mac in this video. So this is where I want to store all my source code. Now that I'm done with that part, let me actually open up the downloaded file for my installer. So let me just open this here, and it will just go ahead to install the GitHub desktop application for me and open it up in a few seconds. Now I'm just waiting for it. It takes a bit of angst here and there, but it will get to it. Oh yeah, here we go. I think I overclicked, so let me just close one of them. So as soon as it's done installing, it will launch, and I guess that's it. So it's launched now. So what I can do is sign into my github.com account. If I have a GitHub Enterprise account, I could sign into that, or I can just all in all skip this step. But because I know my source code is in GitHub, and it might also be for you, I'll just sign into github.com here. So it's gonna open up my browser for me to finish the authentication process. And I know I have multi-factor authentication on my account, so I'll have my phone handy as I put in my username and password. I can decide to save my password or not. So I need to get my two-factor code from my authenticator application here. So that is here. Now I'm authorized. I can now go back to the GitHub desktop application, putting my phone away. Then it asks me to confirm all this stuff and then finish. Now I can decide now to clone one of my existing repositories. Remember, this is also one of my repos. I just went, because it's public, I could access it here. So if I refresh this, you will see that I will be authenticated. I have dark mode enabled on my own GitHub account, so it's all in there for me. So I could just search over here for 100. Then I should be able to find my 100 days of code somewhere here. Then I can decide to clone it down. Then it gives me a pop-up that asks for where I want to store my code. Remember, this is where I said I want to be storing my code. So I'll click on here, copy this, go back to GitHub, desktop application, and then just override this address. You could leave it as default if you wanted to also, but I don't like to do that. I like to have my code somewhere I know I can always find it there. So I'll just go ahead and click on clone. So that is the process of me pulling down my code and then, getting it to work. So now that I've cloned my code, I can start working on it again. Now, you see over here, I love dark mode a lot. So you see almost all my stuff are in dark mode. I don't have any code editor installed on this machine, so I actually need to install one. So I need to go over to download my favorite code editor, code.visualstudio.com, and then download VS Code from my system. You might have this installed on your machine already, so if you have that, you can skip this video. It's a bad way I start doing all the Git stuff. Right, so I'll just go on now to download the stable build for Windows. It's available also for Mac and Linux, and it has loads of extensions for you to use whatever programming language you're doing. I like .NET. That is why I do all my demos in C#. But it has support for almost all languages: Python, Java, JavaScript, TypeScript, frameworks, even mobile apps, Kotlin, Dart, and all that. All those extensions are in there inside VS Code, and it shouldn't be confused with Visual Studio. Visual Studio is the all-in-all development environment for folks like us in the Microsoft developer ecosystem, and of course, it still works with some other languages outside C#, C++, F#, and VB. Right. So VS Code is done installing. So let me just open that up. Right. Don't mind all these prompts. I'm on a virtualized environment, but VS Code will soon be installed. So I accept the license terms and check all the boxes I need to check. I love checking all the boxes because they benefit me a lot, except it's a don't do this stuff. Now that's just my personal preference, of course. You can decide and read whichever one works best for you. Okay, installation is still ongoing and it's almost done. So VS Code will be my editor of choice, and the first part of it is you could use your favorite code editor as the default code editor client for your GitHub desktop application. So when I close this, actually let me just pin this to my taskbar so I could always open it up again. So let's say I decide to close this up now, and I would not launch VS Code just yet. So let's say I open GitHub desktop app again. I could now go and check to see what it will bring up. You see over here, I have my default code editor as VS Code. So I could say, hey, open up this my 100 days of code repository inside Visual Studio Code. And when it comes on this instance, I'm running VS Code for the first time. It might ask me some questions. I'll just ignore them. If you've been running VS Code for a while, you just continue to use it as you normally would, just to be with some new additions and stuff. So now for Git, you could use it now from either the CLI or from GitHub desktop application. I prefer using the command line, but sometimes I use the GUI if I want to do some extra complex stuff where typing commands is just a lot of stress for me. So, VS Code is asking me now to download Git. I don't mind. I'll just go ahead and download Git. It doesn't take me too long a time. Because it's a new machine, of course. There's a video where I did how I install all my dev tools and all that, but this is a new machine and I'll delete it just immediately after this video, so I wouldn't want to install all the complex stuff on it. So Git is done downloading. Let me go ahead and install that. Let me just close this up now. Close this also. Close this also. Close this also. Now you see my code over here, right there. So let me go ahead and just finish installing Git. So another thing with Git is that you can have what we call branches. All right, I'll just do all this by default. There's a lot of clicking around. So I don't know why it's like that these days. Now, another thing with Git is that you have what we call branches. And to be honest, my mind almost skipped that. So, branches. So, let's say, for example, now, this is one of the scenarios where I'll use branches, but let me explain branches first before I actually explain how I would use branches. So, you have your code. Okay, you got your code in here. And then you're working on something, but you don't want to corrupt your main branch. So, you have your main branch, which is the default one you have running. Okay, in some cases it might be master depending on where you learned Git from, but right now, as the time of this recording, it's main for the default branches. All right, so now let's say you're working on a feature and you don't want to corrupt this main branch. It's best practice actually not to corrupt the main branch. Don't ever work on the main branch. Don't even try it. So you do what we call a PR to the main branch. So what you'll do is, let's say you're working on that particular feature, let's say 007, right? You want to work on 007. But you don't want to mess up the structure of this main branch. So what you do is you branch out of main. and then you do all your changes, you add all your files, and as soon as you're satisfied that this is okay and does not corrupt the content of main, you do a pull request into the main branch. If you don't want to do a pull request, I'll explain PR in a while, you do what we call a merge operation. But best practice is actually to do a PR. Okay? Should I do a PR or a merge? A PR will eventually lead to a merge to the main branch or to whatever target branch is your default branch. So you do that. You're on 008, you branch out to 008. You finish all your stuff, you do a PR back to main. So that way, you're keeping the integrity of your main branch secure. So any branch you get out of now, whatever changes or things you spoil in there is only on that branch. And you can always go back to the main branch and pick out the stable version of your code. And most times what will happen is when you start working with development teams, there'll be a lot of people working on the same project with you. So you wouldn't want to corrupt their work, or you don't want them to corrupt your work, whichever ways, or break some build and stuff. So mostly what you would have is that even has more branches than just branching out of that. So mostly you will have the main branch, which will be the single source of truth for all the source code for that team or groups of teams, of teams. Yeah, for large organizations, we have teams of teams, thousands of people working on the same project. So on that main branch, you would go ahead to the develop branch or whatever their active development branch is called in that scenario, in that organization or team. Then folks will now pick out their branches from that develop branch. Okay, so you pick out your own branch from main, from develop rather. So let's say you're working on authentication. Depending on the naming style of your branches for your team, you will decide what kind of thing you do. So you could branch out and call this auth. Once you're done, you do a PR back into develop. Another team could be working at the same time on payment. Once they're done, they do a PR to develop. So most times when folks work on this one and they do a PR, someone that is senior or the senior dev lead will be the one to approve that PR, or maybe a peer, depending on the structure of the development team. Maybe even there's a team that is called authentication, there's a team called payment, there's a team called e-commerce, there's a team called database. So instead of actually doing this also, you could have a branch that is branching out of auth. Maybe authenticate with Facebook. Maybe there's a Facebook auth team that is working on their own feature. There's one working with email authentication. It just works the same way back into the single source of truth for that development team. So branches now help you to be secure, well, in a way to ensure that your single source of truth is not corrupt. So even when you do a PR to that branch now, you can see when you do a PR if it will corrupt, if it has a conflict. We call it a conflict. If it has a conflict with the branch you're trying to merge it back into, and then someone will go ahead and review and you check and resolve the conflicts. For merging those code, maybe you need to go back and fix. And sometimes you have what we call a build server that you connect this code to verify that it doesn't break what is in production, because most times this is a major problem when you push some code that is so bad and customers get angry. So when you push this code, you first put it in a branch and then publish to a particular server to test and see if it's stable enough to match to whatever is going out to the customers. Now that is that. Now I've branched into branches, so let me go back. So you will hear terms like, and this is a little bit of assignment for you to actually go through. You will need to research what we call checking out. So you need to check out branch naming. Another thing you could check out, which will be beneficial in your branching strategy, is check out this thing called Git flow. It helps quite a lot for development teams. So check out these three and you will see the good benefits of it. So let me actually go and show this in a sort of demo. Now that Git is done installing, I could quit all that. Now, first thing I need to do, once Git is installed, is set my Git user configuration. And I think I've done that already when I was setting up GitHub Desktop. Alright, so I'll just leave this as is. So now I have my code now opened up in VS Code. So let me just open that again just in case we missed it. Open in VS Code is what I click over here. And then Visual Studio Code will open up for me. I could set my default code editing environment if I wanted to for this purpose. But VS Code is just my own personal choice because it's versatile, it's cross-platform, and it's nice. Right, so I'll just wait for that to open up. And I'll blow it up on the screen. And I'll do a little bit of zooming in so we can see it quite well. Alright, I'll not do any theme syncing and sorts. So I said the file is dirty. I don't even know what that means, so I'll just close this up. So what I'll do, I want to rename this, okay? So I rename this file, for example, to 001. I create a new folder, call it 002, and I had a file in there, readme.md. I can go on and on and on like that, so I could do a little bit of copy and pasting also. I'll just rename this. So I've done all these additions and stuff. I could go myself and do this in the terminal, okay, to type out the code that git add this, git add that. But you probably know how to do that already, so I wouldn't bore you with all that stuff. Okay, so let me just close this setting, do not save this, and go into my GitHub Desktop application. And once I bring that app up, it tells me, hey, we think you've made some changes. Because actually I've made some changes. So you see I've changed LOL to .csproj, I've renamed it, I've moved it around. So you see this red over here, it's telling me that I have deleted this file. I have deleted this file, I've deleted this file, and I've added this new file. So I could just do a commit in here. So I'll say move some stuff around, or any commit message style that you used to. Move some stuff around, and then I could give it a description. So I could say moved A to B, B to C, D to E, and all that. And then I'll commit this to the main branch. I said it's bad practice to commit to the main branch. Okay, so I'll show you how to do branching out now. So I'll push this now to my GitHub repository in GitHub. Now that that has been pushed, I could go ahead and refresh. Excuse me. And you see my structure, excuse me, has changed. I could change my readme file if I wanted to, but I'll just leave that as is. Okay, so I've done these changes in here. Now, I don't want to corrupt my branchings. I don't want to corrupt my main branch now, because I'll start doing a lot of coding stuff. So what I'll do is I would go over here. You see here, I could create a new branch. You see over down here also, it's telling me that I can choose a branch to merge into main, but I'll skip that for now. I'll just create a new branch, and then I'll call this develop, or developer, or development, or anything that I want to. I think develop is the most used name here. So I create a branch called develop. So it will create a clone of main into itself, and then I can start working on that. Now, right now, I do not have this branch in my origin, in my remote. So if I refresh here, you see I have just one branch. Let me do a little bit of screen moving over here. I'm not sure this one can resize this way, but not a problem. So if I refresh this, I see I have one branch on my origin, on my remote repository, but on offline I have two. So what I need to do is publish that branch that I just created if I want it to be accessible to other developers or even me on another system. So I need to publish that branch to the remote that I got. So now I will refresh this page now, and you will see that I got 2 branches. So if I click into that, I can see all my branches. I will see that this main is my default branch. That will be my single source of truth. So if I make any changes now to the develop branch, now you can see currently now I'm in develop branch. If I go into VS Code also, I would be in the develop branch down here. So I could make changes over here. Okay, I could make changes in here. I will just put this in here. So I've made the changes on my develop branch. So what I need to do is commit my changes. I could do my git commit here. All right. That will be git add, then git commit, put my message in. You probably have learned that in the book I told you earlier on in the video I made. You can check that video up somewhere here. Yep. So what I'll do, I'll go back to my GitHub desktop app, and you can see it's telling me that, hey, dude, you've changed these files. So you want to push it up. So I'll make a commit, updated some files. And then I'll commit that to develop branch. Okay. And then I can push that to the develop branch in the remote. And what I can do next now is do a pull request into main. Let's say I'm done with all the changes I want to make. So I'll do a pull request now into the main branch. So what I can do now, I can go over here and see a list of the pull requests I have to make, but hey, I don't have any pull requests in here, so I'll leave that as is. So what I'll do next is I'll refresh this view. Okay. And if I go to my code area, let me just go back to code. It's telling me, hey, dude, you've pushed the new code to develop. Do you want to compare it with the main branch? Okay, so I'll do a compare and pull. Now, depending on the source control environment you're using, GitLab, Azure DevOps, Bitbucket, any one of them, it will tell you you have some new code. Do you want to merge it? So you put a title for your pull request. You can add reviewers to it if you have more than one person working on the code, which most times you will. So someone to actually check and see if your code is right or not, or if it's optimized, or if it follows the team's coding style. So you can put in a comment also. I'll just put some lorem ipsum here. And this is Markdown supported. So you could do a preview of it if you wanted to. So I'll do a pull request now. I'll create a pull request. And you see it's telling me that it's able to merge. Alright, then it's telling me, hey, there are no conflicts, so I can go ahead and merge this. Now, it's telling me how many files I changed and all that. I could see a list of the files changed. I could see that commit. I could do all this. Now, this pull request is active. If I refresh this view, I'll see, hey, there's a pull request in here. Okay, there's a pull request number 1. Alright, but let me not even worry about that. Now, that's story for another day. So what I can do now is to go ahead and review these changes as the owner. Of course, I'm the only one on this team. So what I can do is, now that I know it's merged, you could add some extra checks to see if it will break the code in the development environment or not. But what I can do is merge this pull request. But before I click on this merge, let me show you another little bit of trick. So now, maybe this pull request is still active and the person who reviewed this says, hey dude, we told you to add this file but you haven't. So quickly go add it, test it on your system and see if it works. So I'll go ahead and add 004. I forgot to add 004. Alright, so I'll do readme.md, add something for 004. Okay. And then quickly put it in there. And then maybe I wanted to update the real readme file also. I can do that also. So that will be 001, 002, 003. Then I made all these changes. Oh, I should add for 004 also because that is another code I added. I should follow Markdown lint rules. So I'll put in a 4 over here. Right. So I save all my changes. Let me just ensure that is all saved. Yep, that is all saved. I could do my committing here. Okay, but GitHub Desktop is what we're looking at. So let's go back into GitHub Desktop and add these changes, commit it to develop, and then push. You will see there will be a little bit of change over here now once that push is completed. So it's telling me, hey, I said yes, I updated some files. I added some changes, updated some files, but that change will still be active on that existing pull request as long as it has not been matched to the target branch. So I could go ahead and say, hey, yes, we've verified that your code is good and all of that. So I can match this pull request and then confirm the merge, and then my main branch is now changed. So now, if I want to do any sort of code in the future, I will branch out of the main branch and start working on it. That is one way to work. Another thing I mentioned, which is Git flow, is one thing I'll be touching on the next video, which is managing your branching strategy for your code, and I'll touch on that in the next video. So I'll see you there. Also, go ahead and like, subscribe, tell your friends about this. You don't want to miss the next video. See ya.